Writing for nobody to read. Why? Why the title, you might say? So let's start with a philosophical question, quite a silly one. And I would like to see some of your answers in the chat box, if you like. Now, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, you know that, right? Does it make a sound? What do you think? Let me have a look at it. Yes, yes, it does. Of course it does, yes. Good morning, Nimta. All right. Now, let me rephrase the question, if I may. If a love letter has been written and no one is around to read it, is it still romantic? What do you think? Yes or no? To some, yes, it is. Of course it is, certainly. All right, okay. Now, I'm surprised nobody said no, because in the second one, I would have said no. Which gives way to, like the former question gave way to the power of observation, basically. If nobody's there to hear it, we don't know. Purely a philosophical question. The second one has to do with, no, it's depressing, yes. So the second one has to do with readership. There has to be somebody there to read it. Which brings me now to the question of what makes writing purposeful? Mind you, writing in general, in real life, not for exam purposes. So let's have a look at some points. First of all, the writer has a specific target reader in mind. So when I'm writing, let's say, an email, when I'm writing a letter, when I'm writing any type of text, I have a target reader in mind. I know, for example, that I'm writing to my employer, to my colleague, to my friend, and so on. Then I believe, or I want to believe, that my piece of writing will actually be read. So it will reach the recipient and it will be read. I know about the topic, I can relate to the topic. It's always something that I want to say, and therefore I have something to say about it. Then I know that I'm free to express my mind. Obviously, in a tactful manner, in an abrupt manner, that depends. I know that I have adequate time to express my mind. And I know enough topic-related language, including lexis, including grammar, and so on, to express my opinion clearly and logically. And I am familiar with the genre, like what an email looks like, how to structure my email. And if you take it, in more detail, how to structure a complaint email, let's say, to a hotel manager or whatever. So these are the things that generally make writing purposeful. Let's look at the implications of those things in the classroom. So from 1 to 8, you can see the points that make writing engaging. And now let's see, what do those things, how are those things translated, or let's say, carried out in the classroom? So I'm going to, one by one, I'm going to send you some, to show you some points. And I want you in the chat box to tell me which one do you think it matches. For example, in the classroom, a learner expects to get a reply or feedback. Which one do you think it matches from 1 to 8? You can type down the number. Good. Good. 2, yes, exactly. Exactly. So I believe that my writing will be read. Therefore, in the classroom, this means that the student, the learner, expects to get a reply or some sort of feedback. What about B? The learner should know certain words. Excellent. 7, yes. What about C? They should know how to put a specific text together, for example, how to put an essay together, an email, or a narrative. 8, you're absolutely right, well done. And they should know how much time they have available. Yes, excellent. And they must know who they are writing to. Exactly, the target reader. Exactly. And they need a topic which is suited to their interests. Some of you say 3, some of you say 4. True, I'll show you the next one so that it becomes obvious. They need to get some ideas and prompts to write about. Three or 4, some of you say 5. Okay, I would say F is number 3 and G is number 4, but they're very close. And last but not least, they should feel safe that their ideas will be treated with respect by both their teacher and their classmates. Obviously, number 5. Well done, everyone. So, on the one side here, we've got what makes real-life writing purposeful, and on the left side, and on the right-hand side, we've got the classroom implications. I'm sure most of you are fully aware of the fact that almost all of those things can be found in coursebooks. Like coursebooks will always prepare the learner for the writing, will give them ideas, useful language, and so on. But when we prepare our learners for exam writing, sometimes we fall into the trap of solely using exam writing materials. Now, let's have an initial judgment of these materials, how much they help us or not address the points that we've just talked about. So, on the face of it, if you look at the topic, it says some parents teach their children at home rather than send them to school. Is this a good or a bad thing for the children? So we've been talking about education, and now we have to write an essay to our teacher for homework, or actually for our teacher for homework. We have the prompts, and we need to include our own idea too. So let's see. So, having adequate time available. Well, there is no concept of time in that case because it's an exam. We already know that we have 120 minutes for this specific exam to write one essay and another piece of writing. So, whether you find this adequate or not, that's up to the candidates. Knowing who they're writing to. Do we? Well, we're writing to our teacher. Not a very interesting target reader, would you say? Being given a topic which is suited to our interests? Well, because it's an exam, it has to include some topics of general interest. In the context of Greece, for example, homeschooling is not a very common thing. However, everybody is expected to sort of have an opinion about it for some reason. Getting some ideas to write about, we are given 2 prompts, and we need to include one of our ideas, one of our own ideas. Do we know whether, it's safe that our ideas will be treated with respect? Obviously. A writing examiner will have a look at it. Now, the 2 important things. Getting a reply or feedback. Well, in that case, it's going to be a comment, and it's going to be whether you pass the writing part or not. That's the feedback. And knowing certain words and how to put a specific text together, well, that's what's being tested. So you see, if we use the exam material without any preparation, Then F and G, two integral parts of making writing engaging, are not there. So what this means is that when we prepare students for an exam, that should be teaching them, not testing them constantly. And what does that mean? It means that we need to remember to allow learners to brainstorm ideas and language before asking them to write about anything. Then it means that we should use authentic text to highlight important features of layout, of organization, and so on, how to put the text together. It means that we should try to make the target reader somebody who actually exists, or somebody who matters, like instead of saying just write to your teacher something. We should spice up topics which are too generic or uninteresting, make them more relevant, make them suit the learner's interests, their preference, their needs. Ask learners to write in pairs to help one another, instead of just making every step of the writing lesson, turning it into an exam, basically. Because remember, you're not practicing literacy, you're not practicing handwriting. Writing is a thinking process. So two people can work together. It doesn't matter who's doing the actual writing. And very important, after they've finished, we need to focus both on language and the content when giving feedback. By language, I mean, you know, vocabulary, grammar, content is like, what about the ideas? Have they addressed the topic? Have they given reasons? Are these reasons convincing? And so on. Something which is usually overlooked in the classroom. Now, the key point, how are those things done online? In the classroom, it's very, very easy. We've all done it. In the live classroom, I mean. But online, how can we do that? Well, number one, if you're using Zoom, for example, use breakout rooms for the learners to do the writing in pairs. Or use a shared document, for example, Google Docs, for real-time writing. And let's see how it works. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. And I'm going to give you a link so that you can actually go to a Google Doc I've prepared so you can do some writing. Obviously, there's quite a lot of you, so there's going to be chaos. But let's try to see. Let's try it. So, there you go. So let's go to that Google Doc and see. I'm actually going to share it. Okay, anonymous hedgehogs, anonymous jackal, anonymous gopher, fox. Good. Good. You're being very kind so far. Thank you. All right. So I'll stop sharing it. But I'm sure now you've seen, we can go back to the Zoom webinar, to the Zoom classroom. So I'm sure you've seen that it is quite easy to set that up, like a shared Google Doc, so that they can do a live real-time writing and you can monitor it. Now, other ways in which you can do all of those things online. Use the platform's whiteboard. Like if you're using Zoom, you can use the whiteboard to elicit and write down topic-related lexis, ideas, to brainstorm first before you ask them to write something. Or you can prepare PDFs or Word documents with either a coursebook text that you find very interesting and it looks authentic. Most coursebook texts nowadays look authentic. Or a very interesting authentic text that you found online to expose them, to expose the learners to model answers. You can ask the learners to evaluate and mark their classmates' writing. Now, how can they do that? If you just tell your learners, oh, read Stavros's writing and mark it, that's a very difficult thing to do. They're not teachers, they're learners, for God's sake. So you should prepare polls or Google Forms with specific questions for the learners to focus on, therefore give much more constructive feedback. For example, let's have a look at such a Google form. I've prepared one for you. And again, I'm going to put the link in the chat box. Here it is. And let me share it too. So you can see the questions basically here, which are very specific for feedback. It's for my own performance. For the responses, I can't see any responses yet, but obviously we'll have to wait. And this is the cat. So, are there any responses? There are 5, yes. Now, let me share what it looks like when we get some responses. So that's the first question. How do you rate Alexander's spoken language? Good. Again, very kind you are. Give an example of good language. Ponderings, love you, great accent, fluency. So, and the important thing is that give an example of poor language. I haven't observed any. Okay. Yes. So you see, the important thing is that it's anonymous too. Now, so we've seen how all of those things can happen online. But so far, I haven't told you much about exam writing, have I? Like, how do those things help me prepare my students for an exam? Well, if you actually think about it, preparing somebody for an exam, first of all, you have to teach them, and then you have to raise their awareness of specification, of the exam specifications, the exam criteria, what they have to do during the exam, and therefore give them some strategies and skills. Now, one interesting way of preparing students for an exam is to raise their awareness of the assessment subscales. In other words, you make the learners, you help them become the writing examiner themselves. So this will raise their awareness of the points that they need to pay extra attention to when sitting the exam. Now, and I've used, for example, Cambridge's assessment subscales, which are content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. Now, remember, if I give learners these 4 points, they won't be able to understand many things, will they? They're quite difficult to decipher. So my job there is to help them and simplify this information for them. For example, what is content? A question I've prepared is, has your classmate done what she or he was asked to do? Did they address all of the points? Did they add an interesting enough idea and also a new idea, different from, the other two prompts? Communicative achievement. Has your classmate used appropriate register? And if you think register might be difficult for the learners, you can even rephrase that. You can even further simplify that. Was their writing too casual or casual enough? Too formal or formal enough? And so on. Now, in relation to organization, has your classmate organized their writing in a logical manner, in a well-structured manner? Did the order of this information make the writing, make the written work easy to read, or did it make it difficult to understand? The next point, now language is quite a heavy thing because it has to do with grammar, it has to do with vocabulary, and also each system there has to do with accuracy and range. So how correct it was and how many different things you've used. So again, as you can see, you can narrow it down, not just in general, in relation to the specific point that you want the learners to pay attention to. For example, in one lesson, you might want them to pay attention to linking words. If they're writing a story, you might want them to pay attention to the use of specific tenses and so on. So it doesn't have to be everything in there. It would be a tall order for students. So, to summarize, tips for online exam writing preparation. Choose tasks and topics suited to the learner's interests. Make sure the learners have a real target reader in mind. That target reader could be their classmate. That target reader could be the reader of a well-known magazine. That target reader could be a hotel receptionist, not just the teacher. Give feedback both on content, give feedback on content and task performance. Don't forget, this is important. This is the communicative value of the writing. Like, the main reason we're writing something is so that we can communicate an idea or, make a request or whatever. Give feedback on language performance using the assessment subscales, but in a simplified and perhaps a focused way. Like focusing on a variety of linking words, organization, spelling and punctuation. It could be different things each time. And use online resources for real-time writing and cooperative feedback, like Google Docs, Google Forms, polls, breakout rooms. And use the exam assessment subscales to help the learners give each other feedback. Don't just tell them, now read your classmates' writing. Did you like it? That's not enough. It doesn't help the learner focus on a specific area of that writing.